It doesn't really matter how reliable an engine seems to be or how many people think it's bulletproof and you can't kill them. Well, have you met the general public? And I'm not saying that everyone is terrible on cars. Most people are actually pretty good about it. But the ones that aren't, they break Toyota 5.7s. I've got another one. The first one I thought was just a fluke. There's a second one here. And I'm actually kind of excited to see what went wrong on this one. I saw what happened on the last one. If you haven't seen that video, you should watch it. But this is another unknown question mark. And there's no real clues at all. I just know that it's a core return, and we're going to find some broken stuff. Toyota's 5.7-liter iForce V8 is the 3UR-FE. This engine came out in 2007 in the Tundra and the Sequoia. It makes 385 horsepower, which at the time was pretty crazy out of a 5.7-liter truck that runs on 87 octane. There's only a few things that I could say bad about these engines. Number one is they are very thirsty, not very good on gas, and it's probably why they replaced this engine with a twin-turbo V6. Let's just hope that's as reliable. The only other thing I gotta say bad about this engine is the fact that you can't get it in a current generation 4Runner. I'd own one if you could. Well, let's turn this over and see what we've got. Okay, now it still has plugs in it, so it's gonna have compression. Seems to feel okay. I don't hear anything knocking. Now we'll get the coils out and pull the plugs. When I pulled the spark plugs out of the right cylinder head, I thought, man, this thing's been chewing on some oil, smells like old fuel. But nothing terrible. And then the very first plug on the driver's side. We got some malice in the combustion palace, folks. That's pretty mangled. That's pretty bad. The strap is lower than the electrode. It doesn't work good like that. The rest of them look okay. It's just that one. Next, we're going to pull the intake manifold. And to do that, first we're going to start by pulling this hose clamp off. This hose a little wiggle, and then you'll want to take this clamp off too, and then you simply just lift the manifold off. Well, the passenger bank looks okay. It's just really dirty. On the driver's side, looks okay, and then well, the valve is not valving correctly. It looks like one of those intake valves is crammed sideways and jammed into the port, and that is bad. Now we're going to start pulling the passenger side valve cover. And if I remember correctly, I have to pull the variable valve timing solenoids out. Oh, there's a little dowel here. Cabbage patch or something, I don't know. I think this screams lack of oil changes because there's a lot of oil deposits, a lot of varnish. It's like murdering the light coming out of my flashlight here, but I don't see anything too terrible yet. It's just really dirty. Chain's still present. Everything looks okay. Now on to the driver's or left side. Similar story on this side. Lots and lots of oil deposits. Probably one of the dirtier. Oh, there's a problem. So come here. Well, there's a valve spring. You're not supposed to be able to do that. Oh, there's some pieces in here. There's a keeper. I can't keep the keeper. Oh, yep, I got it. So it's got a complete intake valve delete. Not a partial. It's a full. The rocker's just kind of jamming out down here. Get out of there. I'll get you. Here is what I was able to fish out. And there's a broken valve spring. It's supposed to be about that big, but instead it was about this big, which let the valve fall. And, well, the rest is history. There's one, the keepers, and the retainer and the rocker are hanging out in the head. So here you can see the missing rocker and the valve delete. And down here, kind of see the retainers hanging out somewhere down in there between those two valves. And the rocker is hanging out down there somewhere. We'll get those fished out as we get this engine apart. Now I'm going to take a minute and remove some of the stuff on the outside of the engine, the exhaust manifold, the motor mount and bracket, and some of this secondary air stuff. Now we're going to start peeling some of the stuff off the front of this engine so we can get the timing cover off. We can get the water pump off. That water pump looks absolutely perfect. Look how clean that is. You could reuse this. And it's some kind of interesting water passages. Toyota just has a thing for that. Now we actually are going to keep that piece. Those get broken when they get hit in the front. Let's get this crank pulley off. Well, that's a lot easier than using a puller. The next thing we're going to do is remove the oil filter housing and the oil cooler. And I'm going to show you something that I really don't like when manufacturers do. So you can see it's bolted on here. There's a stud here, and a bolt here. Now this bolt here, you can't access it normally unless you remove the sending unit. This could have been any other angle and not block that bolt. Yeah. So we're just going to do the right thing and use a wrench on it and say, screw it, we're not taking that off. Ha! Okay, let's get the rest of these bolts out. Also surprised that that didn't make a mess. Now I'm going to get this crossover pipe out of the way. To get this tensioner off, there's an Allen bolt in the center, and it's also filled with a bunch of junk. So we're going to make sure we get all that stuff out of there so we reduce the chances of stripping this out, because it's not very deep. It's pretty shallow. We'll see how this goes. The safest way to do this is to use an impact in a worn out socket, and then just, make it one piece. That didn't work. So we're going to move on to plan B, which is more force. See, more force usually works. Now I can't get my socket back. Now I'm just going to remove as many 12mm headed bolts as I can, and then I'll go up in size to 14 And eventually this cover will be off. All right, I think it's time to graduate to the 14mm headed bolts. And these are just access plugs. We don't need to mess with those. Just doing a final check before I start prying on this thing to make sure I got them all. Let's give old Blue here a little bit of time here on the spotlight. I think there's another one here. Why would you put two bolts so close to each other? Okay, that side's loose. Wasn't particularly fun. Oh, no. It's coming off. Well, now we can get a better look at just how dark and dirty and dingy the inside of this engine is. I don't really see anything broken, but it is pretty filthy. It's got a bit of slack on it, but that just could be the position of the engine. I don't see any metal bits. There's no sparkles. I don't see anything too crazy yet. Yeah, the first thing we're going to do before we take the tension out of these chains is crack these loose, get these off, and then we'll pull all the timing parts off. Actually, these secondary air hoses are on my last nerve. We're going to remove this secondary air system here and these valves. Just make some space. Much better. The next thing we're going to do is remove the timing chain tensioners, and you can never be too careful. Well, that wasn't much. It was all for naught. So here's a closer look at what the timing system looks like. You can see this guy isn't even bolted in. There's not a lot of wear. Looks pretty good. I don't really see any other issues in here. It's just dirty. That one looks pretty good too. All right, see if we can get these beautiful timing chains off of here. I'm gonna have to take that rail off. That one looked good too. Nice. For some reason, this still has some tension on it. There we go. Hey! What did you do that for? I didn't say that was okay. Why you gotta be so difficult? That did not help me. Well, we have ourselves in a pickle. I guess we could just take this all the way off. That's what we're gonna do. Didn't really want to have to do that just now, but so I don't remember how difficult this was on the last engine. But we're just gonna walk these off, and it's gonna come off. Get these chains out of here and in a safe place. So judging by the shape of this cam gear, If that flat spot was closer to this, that chain would have come off. Before we go any further, we're going to try to remove the injectors and rails. It'll just make this a little easier to move the heads around. Nice and easy. I know I've mentioned this in the past on previous Toyota V8 teardowns, but I do like the design of having kind of a cam plate and then the head, so if this is starved of oil and it tears up a cam journal, you don't have to replace the cylinder head to get it fixed. The downside of that is, and many of you let me know this, is that they are prone to leaking because they are just sealed to the cylinder head with RTV. Now, I'm going to crack the cam caps loose. I'm getting better at this. And I have to alternate sizes because there's a 10 and a 12, and a 10 and a 12. So this is going to take a little bit of editing and some time, but we'll get it done. Well, the cam journals look really good. I don't see any damaged rockers on this side. With as dirty as it is, I expected to see more damage to the journals, but we haven't looked at the cams or the caps yet. Well, the cams are not that great. They're not awful, but come on, focus. They're not terrible, but they're definitely not perfect. Signs of dirty oil. I don't know if it was a starvation issue, but certainly some debris ran through here. And the caps don't look too bad. It's a little bit of wear, but not really worth mentioning. The cams were definitely what saw the wear and damage. Now I've got a few bolts to remove this cam plate, which will give us access to the head bolts. Oh, it's like an old can of tuna on a hot day in a car filled with trash. Get some mustard on it. All right, I think I have all the bolts out. I can start to pry this off. Now it's time to crack these head bolts loose. These are some triple squares, M12 triples. Hopefully they're not too tight. Well, it's a lot of racket for one bolt. They are on the tight side of things, I'd say. There are also two more head bolts on the outside of the head casting. Okay, this head should just come right off. Well, this all looks pretty tidy in here. I don't see really anything too concerning. The tops of the pistons aren't shiny like they smacked the cylinder head. All the pistons are facing the right direction. 4 connecting rods, check. And the spacer in here is not melted. So I don't think this was an overheated situation. And the head looks really nice too, nice and even color in the combustion chamber. I don't see any valve damage, just carbon buildup. All right, now we need to start on the other side. We're going to just pull these off together just like the other bank. Nice and easy. The cams from this side of the engine are about the same condition, a little more wear on the journals, but oddly enough, I don't really see any damage from kicking a rocker off or a broken valve spring. I think it got lucky that it didn't take out a cam. Yeah, there's a little bit of wear on these lobes. It's not terrible by any stretch. Same thing with the cam caps. They all look really nice. I don't really see hardly any wear on these. This is just so dirty in here. But now that we have the cams out of the way, we can kind of dig around and see. There's the retainer. Now we've already fished one of the keepers out, and there's another one in here somewhere, I would imagine. There's the rocker hiding out right there. And that's where the valve is supposed to go. Like all of these stayed in their home, but that one did not. Now we're going to remove this cam plate. Now I'm going to remove these two outside head bolts. And time for some noises. Man. Okay, here's the moment. It's gonna leak on me. Don't pee on me, please. Oh, it's peeing. Oh, I knew it. What? Well, let's get this head gasket off of here. Lots of coolant. Let's get the coolant out of there. We done? Well, there's the damage to the piston. A couple real deep holes in it, but didn't go all the way through, it doesn't look like. What's interesting is there's no stem anywhere. The rest of these, they look okay. I don't see any issues here, just dirty. But the cylinder head starts out okay, and yep, that's not how valves fit in the seat. And it took the wrong seat. You're not supposed to sit down like that. It's really not too bad, and there's a couple marks on this valve here, a couple marks in the combustion chamber. I don't think this happened at a super high RPM because the damage would have been much worse. One thing I do want to do is turn this engine over to see if that piston comes all the way up. I think it does. Yeah, it's got some pretty deep marks in it. All right, now it's time to flip this thing upside down. I'm pretty confident that it's mostly drained, but we will find out in short order. Oh, it's got some oil in it. Making a mess. Now let's start peeling the pan off. Okay. This is really glued in here. Well, that's unexpected. Well, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm surprised, judging by the failure we've seen so far. But first, the sheer volume of RTV here. I mean, save some for the rest of us, dude. It's so much. And then, well, let me get a light. This engine has some forbidden glitter. Sparkles, I see some bearing material. I did not expect that one. I thought, oh, this engine probably just ran with a miss. Nope. And then the pickup is sealed with RTV because you can never have too much RTV in places that it doesn't belong. I don't think that caused any issues, but it just goes to show you the type of craftsmanship that was done to this. I'm pretty sure Toyota did not do that. You can see the original RTV and then the RTV that they added. So clearly they did a great job. And then in here, there's the keeper. Look at that guy hanging out right there. He must have been floating around in here. And then this, I don't know where that came from. And that looks like RTV, I don't know. The next thing we're going to do is pull the upper oil pan. Oh, can't reach that one yet. And now we pry. Before we go any further, I'm going to get this remain seal plate off. This doesn't look too bad yet, but we haven't cracked any of these rod caps off. All right, we're going to rotate this over so we can start pulling the rods and pistons out. We're going to always start at the front. It's much cleaner that way. Okay, start getting the rods and pistons out. Whoa, these are tight. I love these blocks. They have tool holders. Well, the rod bearings paint a picture of neglect. These are pretty rough for a Toyota. Could be a higher mileage engine, but look at the grooves. It's definitely had something run through the oiling system. And then there are these. These are pretty much gone. These are gone. Now they're not distorted, which is good. I don't know if it was hammering or not, but it was probably making some kind of noise. But the last one is fine. These two share a journal, so Not quite sure why this was the one that chose to come apart, but just goes to show you that there can be more than one problem with an engine. And most of the rods and pistons look pretty decent. They're just dirty. Not a lot of skirt wear. I don't see a lot of problems with these. The rings are free. Nothing's like carboned up in here. But then let's go to the cylinder that ate itself here. There's the marks. That one's pretty deep right there. I don't think any of them went through. I can't see any signs that anything came through there. So I guess the stem for that valve must have exited out of the exhaust. It's pretty amazing. It was a pretty long stem, I would imagine. We're going to get this tube out of the way here. That's just going to kind of come out just like so. All right, do we have sound? Yeah, we have sound. Okay. Well, we're going to do this the old-fashioned way here. Oh, the smell. The smell is bad. Real bad. Oh. Smells like a microwave diaper. With mustard on it. Whew. I don't know why I just took a deep breath of that. It made it so much worse. I don't know what it is. The domestic stuff doesn't usually smell like this, but the import stuff is... Oh, I need a break. Oh, that's the last of it. Wow, that smells bad. Whew, I need some fresh air. But first, let's pull the crankshaft out. Now the main bearings look pretty bad. They're almost worse than some of the rod bearings. Not the one, but the most alarming part is look at the color of the oil in here. It's a lot of metal in there. Forbidden glitter, which you don't want to find inside of an engine. Now the crankshaft doesn't look too bad at first, but this journal here is pretty rough. It's definitely going to need to be polished, but it could need to be turned if someone wanted to reuse this crankshaft. Something else worth mentioning, this cylinder was the cylinder that dropped the valve, broke a valve spring, and it left some really deep grooves in here, and that was probably parts of the valve as this engine was turning over. Again, I don't think this was a high RPM failure, but it still did some pretty significant damage. We have one more matter of business, and that is to retrieve the rest of this valve. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. That is really in there. No, that is a lot more difficult than I expected. Let's see. Oh, it's moving now. There we go. Valve is out. Wow, that's pretty awesome. As you can see, it did some pretty significant damage to the seat here and here. And I suppose you could fix this cylinder head, but this head isn't worth enough to warrant all that work. But for what happened to this engine, this isn't that bad. We've seen much worse. Well, here's the remnants of that valve. You can see the damage on the sides from that piston cramming it into the valve seat. And there's the broken valve spring. Overall, for the failure, not as bad as we've seen. I really cringe at the idea of replacing valve springs as a maintenance item. It's so much labor unless you have a pushrod LS or something like that. Most of these engines require a ton of work to replace valve springs, and I'm not advocating that that's a good idea at all. But we have seen a lot of broken valve springs cause catastrophic engine failure. I do think that in some of these cases, there's some warning signs that are ignored. The check engine light comes on, it throws some trouble codes, and then maybe the owner of the car just takes a piece of electrical tape and boom, fixes it. Or maybe it's ticking and running poorly, and they try to give it the old Italian tune-up, and, well, you see what happens. I don't think this thing broke under load or high RPM. This was probably an idle failure. There weren't that many dings in the piston, and it was kind of a not great engine anyway. I mean, it probably burned oil, judging by the way the plugs looked, and the bearings did not look good. Someone had also been in there with a lot of RTV. Way too much. But this was still a great teardown. I still have some good parts. I've got a good cylinder head. I've got a good timing cover, intake manifold. So I'll do just fine on this core. It's just not that common to find a 5.7, which is why I jumped at the chance. If you'd like to buy parts off of this engine or any of the other engines I've torn down, or even this oofed WRX, it's rusty. They're all rusty. I'm going to leave our email and our website in the video description. And as always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all. And I'll catch you on the next one.